Hey everyone, it's been a hot minute since you've seen me, I imagine. There's a lot I want to catch up on in terms of stuff I want to get to, but before that, let's just get straight into the star of today. Zirin here, and welcome to World's End Club, a tale about the go-getters and a heartwarming trip across an apocalyptic Japan. This game was initially released incomplete on the Apple Arcade, with the complete Switch version coming out later. World's End Club is made by Tookyo Games, a studio started by Kodaka and Uchikoshi. If that name sounds familiar, I actually did a playthrough of the first game, Death Come True, a while back, and that was... yeah. Pretty much all of the initial promotional material, and even the first hour of World's End Club, would lead you to believe that this is a Danganronpa ripoff. Doesn't help that the game starts with a game of death involving kids and a quirky mascot, nor the fact that Kazutaka Kodaka is the lead director for this game. You know, the guy who wrote and created Danganronpa, but honestly that couldn't be farther than the truth. The whole death game aspect of World's End Club is only for the first hour of the introduction, and after that, the rest of it is entirely focused on the trip of the go-getters. A group of 12 children with some godlike stamina as they trek across the entirety of Japan in their search for humanity, and to find out generally why it looks like an apocalypse happened. While the genre of World's End Club is an action-adventure, as in all of the action of the game takes place in platforming sections, I would be more inclined to call it something like a visual novel platformer. Mostly because, thanks to Uchikoshi being the writer, say if this game is 10 hours long, you spend about 7 of it in cutscenes or dialogue sections. Which to some might sound like a bad thing, but really, the visuals and cutscenes is where World's End Club shines, so more of it in my opinion is a good thing. World's End Club is a story of the Go-Getters, a group of 11 children who awake in an underwater theme park, and are subsequently harassed by the Monokuma ripoff Penelope. After getting out of there, which comprises the first hour, the Go-Getters reach the surface, only to find every town in a state of ruin with no sign of humanity. With the belief that Tokyo might have some answers, they begin their journey from Kagoshima in the very west of Japan, all the way to Tokyo in the east. While Kodaka is the director of the game and not the writer, I can see a bit of his influence in this work, especially with how the heartwarming tone of the Go-Getters and the entire adventure in general contrasts itself with the end-of-the-world scenario happening in the background. Everything about the Go-Getters and their interactions with each other are so sweet, they'll probably give you diabetes just watching it, from the fact that all of them have their little Go-Getter signposts they do constantly, to even them seeing their own Go-Getter theme song they apparently made, in unison, multiple times throughout the game with little dance numbers. This is then contrasted with stuff like some of the Go-Getters ending up as ritual sacrifices from brainwashing. At first I was laughing at how much they pushed the whole children on a happy-go-lucky field trip thing, but I will admit, slowly throughout the game, they eventually grew on me enough that I enjoyed the cast by the end. I will say though, their interactions with each other and the story itself in general are so cheesy that it might be a little much for some. The writer for this game is Uchikoshi, and he brings many of his trademarks to World's End Club, albeit in a much lighter form. Uchikoshi again is famous for writing a good chunk of the Infinity series of visual novels, as well as the Zero Escape series. Whether you like him or not, I think Uchikoshi does a great job of building up suspense in terms of what's going on. As for whether that build-up leads to an appropriate payoff, or ends up so out of left field you have to wonder how we even got here in the first place, depends entirely on which Uchikoshi work you are looking at. In terms of World's End Club, this is probably him at his tamest for better or for worse. World's End Club is all about the Go-Getters and their journey from beginning to end. The Go-Getters is composed of 12 individuals. Rachel, the silent leader and player character, with a name that hurts me physically to read, Vanilla, the pink-haired mood maker, Kansai, the wannabe leader and baseball player, Chuko, short-tempered and short in general, Mo-chan, the chubster who likes food, Nyoro, the smart and calculating scientist, Aniki, the lone wolf, Pai, the caring airhead, Tatsune, the stickler for the rules, Pochi, the quiet one always gaming on his device, Jenu, an aspiring actress, and Yuki, the amnesiac girl who falls from the sky. While I don't think any of these characters have mind-blowing character arcs or anything, all of them have a personality that we've seen before, and even how they develop is likely something you can guess within the first 2 hours of the game. I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing, so long as it's presented in a likable fashion. Luckily, the Japanese voice actors do a great job in bringing life to these characters. The Japanese cast has a bunch of household names that you've probably heard of before, Megumi Ogata and Ai Kayano, just to name a few. A fun side note is that, although the cast is composed of 6 guys and 6 girls, thanks to the fact that they're all supposed to be kids, pretty much every go-getter aside from one is voiced by a female voice actress. These VAs do a great job, which is important since the entire crux of the game is all about how much you come to care about the go-getters and how much you want to see them succeed. If the game was entirely text-based, it would definitely lose a lot of what makes it so special. So I've gotten this far, but you might have noticed that I barely mentioned the gameplay, and that's because I think the gameplay is probably the weakest section of the game. Not saying it's terrible by any means, however the best way I would describe it is bland, uninspiring, and a little janky. The action of Road's End Club takes place in 2 forms. One is a dialogue portion of the game, filled with cutscenes, camp scenes, and even a little decision route splitting choices you have to make, where you read a ton of text and watch the characters do their thing. The other more involved portion of the game is the puzzle platforming sections, where you have to move through levels using your platforming skills. In each stage, you are given control of one of the 12 go-getters, each learning a skill throughout the game unique to them, which can all be activated by pressing a single button. These skills are used to clear the obstacles that block you from progressing through each stage. I think where the gameplay fails is how ridiculously handholdy everything is. Even though you walk around usually in groups of 3 throughout every single stage, the game, for whatever reason, forces you to only use one go-getter in each section, with usually an entire stage focusing on whichever go-getter got a new power. This makes every section boil down to move from left to right, press your A button on everything in your path. Oh, you got a rock power? Use it on the enemy in front of you. If it wasn't clear enough, a character would usually say something like, "Oh wow, there's a big enemy. Your power sure would be useful around here." Like, no duh. The game has puzzles as well, I guess, but the puzzles are ridiculously simple. Like, get this box from A to B. At the very least, if there was a need to mix and match different abilities of different go-getters for different situations, that would lead to some room for interesting level design. But if all you need to do is go left to right, and you only have 2 buttons, one for jump and the other one for your skill, there's only so much you can do. I picked normal mode, and while there is an easy mode, I assume all it does either affect your own HP or the boss's HP. Speaking of which, there are bosses, but all of them are really easy and boil down to you die once or twice to figure out what the enemy does, and then you proceed to stomp them. The only reason that you might have trouble is that the game also controls awkwardly at times. There are moments when it feels like I try to jump but nothing happens, or an enemy's attack might have a hitbox that hits me even though it really looks like it shouldn't, which in a game where you die in one hit is a little annoying. There was even a time where my movement completely froze after using one of the character's reverse gravity abilities, and I just had to wait till I died. The gameplay honestly is not that great. What does make World's End Club a unique experience on its own, however, is the presentation. It's how the game presents the characters, how every cutscene flows. That's what really makes this game special and charming. How the game always has these cute reaction faces of all the present heroes in little cutouts that change depending on who's in the cast at the time, or how when the characters are deciding who to split up after rock, paper, scissors, instead of just having the 3D models separated, it's shown on this tricolor clipboard with little Polaroid pictures of each of the main characters. While the graphics of World's End Club is nothing to write home about, the 3D models aren't spectacular in any way, and the backgrounds aren't super outstanding either, they still do a great job of contributing to the innocent, cartoon-like vibe they were going for. While the models are simple, they all have their own unique designs which really give you a feel of what kind of character they are just by looking at them. Everyone has a nice variety of expressions on their faces in the speech bubbles. Some games will only use 3D models or only static hand-drawn art, but it turns out that having both is pretty effective. There's also a surprising amount of CG, which maybe because I played a game recently that barely had any, that I'm a lot more appreciative of that fact. These CGs do a fantastic job of highlighting pivotal moments throughout the entirety of the game. The music is decent enough, no absolute bangers or anything, but they do an overall fine job of setting the mood, and there is a surprisingly huge number of them, 70 themes total. At its heart, World's End Club is about a group of kids going on a trip of discovery, of finding out how a world they once knew has turned into a seemingly deserted wasteland which nature has overrun. Not just that, it is also a story about learning about the go-getters, who they are, and the burdens they carry. Since you play as a transfer kid who joined this group quite late, each one of their pasts before you met them remain mostly a mystery, one which you'll find out as you trek with them throughout the entirety of Japan. While the gameplay of World's End Club is not great, I think how the game conveys its story and characters is incredibly charming. If you're looking for a crazy deep suspense thriller that Uchikoshi usually does, you won't get it here, but if you are looking to enjoy a lighthearted Saturday morning cartoon adventure where a bunch of kids literally break out into song about the power of friendship, and that cheesiness sounds hilarious to you, then World's End Club might be worth looking at, or at least watching a playthrough of it online, because honestly the gameplay again is a little dull. There is a bit more I want to get into detail about, but since it will probably go into spoilers, I'll have a small section at the end talking about World's End Club in a bit more detail, and a tiny bit about Uchikoshi's habits that he tends to have. But first, before we get to all of that, if these kind of Japanese games sounds interesting to you, the like button is down there, subscribe if you want to support the channel, and feel free to tap the notification bell if you want to stay updated on when the next one comes out. I know it's been a few months since I was last here, been busy, mentioned on my Twitter a couple of times, but honestly I was even away from that for the past while. I should be back in action sometime during the next month, so I'll see all of you then or maybe sooner. Anyhow, for those of you interested in hearing me just babble on about World End Club spoilers, stick around, otherwise I'll see you later. Till next time. Alrighty, so if you're here, I assume that you are interested in World's End Club but not enough to actually play it, which is totally fair. Or maybe you played it already, or you just like hearing me talk, which, hey, thanks. So earlier, I called World's End Club Uchikoshi Light, and the reason I say that is because for those of you who've played some of the games he's written, Infinity Series, Zero Escape Series, or I don't know, AI, Insomnium Files, and Punchline, I haven't played the latter two, so I won't be speaking for them, but anyways, if you've played any Uchikoshi game after Ever 17, you probably know that Uchikoshi has a number of things that he really likes to use over and over. First of all, he's a big fan of twists, of trying to have something that blows the reader's mind in some way. One specific twist he really likes is the idea of playing with the perspective of the player, something along the lines of, you aren't just playing as the main character you think you are, but are actually an alien from another dimension. One whom the characters themselves will directly acknowledge, that sort of thing. Aside from that, he also really likes science fiction, human psyche, everything around that gamut, as you probably expect from me saying this, but World's End Club has everything I just mentioned, except it's all tossed into a very lighthearted adventure instead. I think the main characters, Pochi, Vanilla, and Rachel, do have some solid twists with decent build-up, but the executions could have been better. Vanilla's reveal that she's actually been a ghost this entire time, that only 3 of the go-getters could see, is a cool reveal. The only problem is that her reason for revealing it feels like she only did it because she noticed the game was reaching the halfway point and decided to. She says she's gotten tired of pretending and all that, but it seems really lazy and very arbitrary. Like it could have happened at any time, as opposed to something actually prompting her to realize this. Rachel and Pochi's twist doesn't happen quite as abruptly, since it happens in the last 2 hours. The reveal that Rachel is a robot that Pochi has been controlling, therefore throughout the entirety of the game, while we thought we were Rachel, we were actually playing as Pochi, controlling Rachel. The twist itself is fine, the only problem I have with it is that right before that big scene, the game finds it necessary for the entire Go-Getter crew to just absolutely savage Pochi, calling him absolutely useless, whose only value is as a mascot, which just isn't true. He fixed a train and drove it, which isn't something most people can do. He also did the navigating, acted as the voice of reason. He has a pretty good track record. Yeah, I get it, kids can be cruel, but this just feels like they were really forcing it just so Pochi can go to Rachel and be like, I wish I was the hero that we respected and like you, and to reveal, oh, it is him. Aside from feeling incredibly out of place, it also makes all the go-getters seem like real assholes. Even if they were trying to lead up to the hoe, everyone gets super angry at Pochi once they find out he was actually a spy for the evil Mike. They could have done that without that scene. Them getting angry in the first place seems kinda dumb too, especially because the game really highlights the, oh, Penelope says she wants to execute the traitor. So, if Pochi is a traitor to Mike, that means that Pochi is trying to help you guys. But I get it, they want to have that big, ah, you're the traitor scene. There is another twist, the one where the player is actually some being that Pochi can directly communicate with one-on-one. But I mean, I think everyone saw that coming a mile away from the first minute they mentioned other world communicators in like the third hour of the game. At this point, it would be more surprising if Uchikoshi didn't sneak something like that in the game than if he did. While World's End Club does have all of these twists, I think the base plot is something that the game telegraphs fairly obviously from the get-go, which probably contributes to the feeling that the beginning of the game is a little too slow. For instance, within the first 2 hours, the game mentions Mike and that it's his fault the world became like this, and also that Nyoru's father is a scientist who pushed away his daughter and locked himself in the lab to create something. It doesn't take a mad genius to connect the two obviously glaring dots. So when 5 hours in, the character is still hinting at like, oh, a mysterious Japanese scientist is the one who created Mike, it's kinda like, again, no duh. The story feels entirely like a Saturday morning cartoon, to the point of having entirely incompetent villains, and Deus Ex Machinas about the power of friendship. It's done so blatantly that I have to assume it's done on purpose to contribute to the whole lighthearted feel of the entire game. In the end, what makes World's End Club shine isn't really the gameplay, the story, but rather the presentation. Although the characters are entirely predictable, it really goes to show how fun dialogue, cute interjections, and a lighthearted tone can go a long way in endearing a player to your cast. Now, if only it was given to a, much better base game, but oh well, what can you do? As much as I like to poke fun at Uchikoshi, I really am rooting for Tokyo Games to eventually make something pretty dang solid. So far though, with Death Come True and now World's End Club, both have been kind of misses. I do hope that Tribe 9 or whatever they come out with next will end up being a good one. And that's all from me. I already said my like, subscribe, all that spiel earlier, so all I'm gonna say is, I'll be seeing you later. Till next time.